This is question number 10 on the review, and it asks us to sketch the graph of 1 minus f of x plus 2 based on our knowledge that f of x is equal to 1 over x. So we're going to have to know what this first graph is, 1 over x, and then what we're going to do is do a bunch of translations, reflections, things like that, based on our beginning graph. So our first graph, 1 over x, we know we have a vertical asymptote. Here x equals 0. It goes up and it comes down like this, and down like that. So that's our basic 1 over f of x graph. And then what this says, we can also rewrite this as negative f of x plus 2 plus 1, because then we always think of our vertical shifts at the end. Our next graph then would be to multiply, we're multiplying our f of x by a negative, which means we're going to flip it about our x-axis. So our next graph, when we move, we'll still have our vertical asymptote at x equals 0, but because we've got a negative, all of our values here become negative here, and all of our negative values here become positive. So that's our next translation. Then, our third graph, what we'll be doing is shifting this graph 2 units to the left, and that's to the left because we're adding. So what was now our vertical asymptote at 0 is now at negative 2, but none of our values change. We're shifting our graph over to, so it looks like this, and it looks like that, but none of our values have changed. Oh, sorry, we haven't shifted it up yet. So not only do we know that it has a vertical asymptote at x equals 0, this basic graph, but we also know that there's a horizontal asymptote here at y equals 0, and that stays for us until our very last graph, because our very last graph says that then we add 1, so it means that our horizontal asymptote shifts up 1, and so we know that we have our vertical asymptote here at x equals 2, and what was originally our horizontal asymptote at y equals 0 is now at y equals 1. And so all of our values here shift up, and I'm going to erase this little end part here so you can see what happens on this graph is that all of our values go up like that. So that is your final looking graph. You've got a horizontal asymptote at y equals 1. You've got a vertical asymptote at x equals negative 2. And you've reflected your basic graph about the x-axis because of the negative. And so that is how you use transformations to graph the second equation.